everyone, my name is Professor Morgan Roth and I teach human anatomy. One of my favorite things about the course is that we get to apply our theoretical knowledge of our structures to real anatomical specimens. Today I'm going to show you one of our favorite specimens for the course.
This is our mink. Okay, so we use the mink to study the muscles, and we also use the mink to study all of the internal organs. Okay, so what I've done here is I've opened the ventral cavity. Ventral means belly side, so that's the entire cavity. The ventral cavity has two subdivisions. The first is the thoracic cavity. Thoracic means chest. And then we have the abdominal pelvic cavity, which is everything below the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the boundary between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity, and that's this sheet of skeletal muscle right here. This is for breathing. It changes the shape and size of the thoracic cavity, and that's how you breathe. Okay, so I thought I would just sort of show you some of the internal organs of the mink. Let's start up here. So in the thoracic cavity, up near here in the throat area, we have two structures. This one right here, this is the trachea. Now the trachea has little C-shaped rings on it, okay, these little rings, and that's what gives it that stripe appearance. It always looks striped like that because it has the C-shaped rings, and if you feel it, it even has the texture. You can feel those rings. So that's going to be the windpipe for breathing. Behind the trachea, we have a very soft tube, and the soft tube is called the esophagus, and the esophagus is for carrying food down into the stomach, food and water. So we have basically two pathways here. We have the trachea for air and then the esophagus behind it for food. And so if we follow it down here, this area here, this is the heart, and the heart used to be enclosed in a little pouch called the pericardial sac. So all I did was I opened that up, and this would be the heart, all of this here. Surrounding the heart, this is the lungs. Okay, so they sort of engulf the heart like that. Okay, so here's the diaphragm again. Underneath the diaphragm is the liver. The liver is a important organ for the digestive system. It creates bile. It also filters your blood to keep it nice and clean, and stores excess glucose, which is sugar. Okay. Kind of embedded between the lobes of the liver is a little gallbladder. This little pouch right here is the gallbladder, and the function of the gallbladder is to store the bile that the liver makes. Okay, so let's put that up here. Now underneath the liver we have the stomach. Okay, so the liver kind of goes off to the right side, so off to the left side we have the stomach. And I've actually opened up the stomach so we can look inside. And inside of the stomach, we have these little folds. Those folds are called rugae. And the function of those folds is that when the stomach fills up with food, those folds will flatten out, and that allows the stomach to have considerable expansion, and that's how you can really stuff a lot of food. So remember that for Thanksgiving Day, right? You've got a considerable expansion because of those rugae. Okay, and one interesting thing is the size of your rugae for the minks depends on whether or not the stomach was full or empty when it died. Okay, so that was the stomach. Continuing on, we have the small intestine. Oh, by the way, see this right here coming off this is called the greater curvature of the stomach, coming off of that side here. This is called the greater omentum, and so if you have a beer belly, right, the part that gets has the stored fat in it, that is the greater omentum, and it covers over the intestines. And if you'll notice that in this region here, we have the rib cage, and that's a lot of good protection for those organs in there. But the abdominal pelvic cavity, it doesn't have any bones. Instead, what it has is this little fat apron, and that covers over the organs and keeps them nice and safe. Okay, so we'll flip that up. Okay, so all of this in here, this is the small intestine, and then the food will come from the stomach, okay, from the stomach and go into the small intestine, and in the small intestine, that's where you're going to absorb the nutrients of the small intestine, and the small intestine is anchored to the back wall by this structure that's called the mesentery. Mesentery. And running through the mesentery, you have some blood vessels here. These blood vessels will take the nutrient-rich blood coming off of these small intestines. So as the nutrients goes out of the intestines and into the bloodstream, then they're going to run up into the liver, and then the liver is going to filter out all that excess good nutrients, the glucose, the sugars, and it will store it for later. Okay, so that liver does a lot of good stuff for us. So here is the small intestine. The small intestine will become the large intestine. Here is the large intestine. The large intestine has the colon and then ending in the rectum. Okay, so that's finishing processing your food. Okay, so underneath that, let's look at this piece. This right here, this is the urinary bladder. Urinary bladder that stores urine. Now the organ that makes urine in the first place is called the kidney. Okay, so if I take all those organs, the small intestine, and I move it off to the side, in the back here, hiding behind the membrane, is the kidney. And that kidney, inside of the kidney, we have two functional regions. I cut mine open. Along the outside, that's the cortex, renal cortex. In the middle here is the renal medulla. So the urine is going to be created in the cortex, and then the urine will run through the medulla. It'll collect and then run through this tube, which is called the ureter, and then that's going to empty inside of the urinary bladder, and this is where you're going to store the urine, and it'll come out through the urethra. Okay, that's called the urinary system because it makes urine, right? Okay, and then one other thing, the reproductive system. So mine, in this mink that I have, is a female. And so one interesting thing about the females is that the minks, because they have litters instead of singular or twins, they can have multiple births at the same time. They have a different structure for their uterus. Okay, so here would be the vagina, and here is a very specialized uterus. Instead of being just one pear-shaped pouch like we humans have, they have more of a Y-shaped structure, and that's called the uterine horn. Okay, so one goes this way, and then the other one goes that way. And that's why they can have births, they can have pregnancies on either side, and they can have multiple babies. Okay, so that is the uterine horns, and then the ovaries are going to be tucked nice and neatly at the ends of these uterine horns. Okay, that's the general rundown. I hope you enjoyed looking at the mink. I enjoyed showing it to you.